Now, we have with us on the line CPA Phil Liberatore, who's a tax expert, but he's also someone who keeps up with things that could greatly impact people's finances, families' financial situations. And so he decided to blow the whistle and call attention to something that really didn't get enough attention in the news media, and that is the Equifax update and the cybersecurity breach that was broken and the impact on individuals. Phil, thank you for joining the program. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be on your show, Brad.
Now, Phil, tell me, what has happened since the news of the cybersecurity breach broke? What are we dealing with?
Well, it's a complete disaster, Brad. 145 million people were caught in this breach with Equifax compromised bank and credit card information. In fact, there's even reports from people in Canada that's been affected. So that's how broad this breach was. But the biggest thing for your listeners out there, my wife's credit card information was stolen, and of course they used that. My office manager's bank account was drained out. They forged fraudulent checks and drained out her bank account. I mean, this is affecting people around me, Brad, and I'm sure some of your listeners have been affected in some way. So this is a big disaster.
Right. And Phil, I bet there's a lot of people out there who've been impacted who don't even know they've been impacted yet.
Yeah, they can actually go on the website to see if their information has been stolen, Brad, and go to the Equifax website and check to see if their information has been compromised.
Okay. Now, what are we're looking at here? Yeah, it's a disaster. I understand that the IRS had actually awarded Equifax a contract worth $7 million after the news of the security breach broke. Is that right?
Yeah, this is really absurd, to be honest with you, Brad. But there was a contract with the same company, Equifax, for transaction support on their identity management and security ID support with the IRS, and of course they suspended it shortly thereafter after they got some blowback on that, Brad. So it's just interesting that the IRS had actually contract with Equifax after this major breach.
Yeah, it makes no sense, and yet we're talking about settlements that could range if a lawsuit's filed between, I think I understand, $500 million and $1 billion.
Yeah, Wall Street analysts say that it could be at least $500 million to up to $1 billion in fines and lawsuit settlements, and it's major, Brad.
Yeah, and I'm sure the attorneys will make some money in the process too.
Absolutely.
Now, so, what do you recommend people to do to respond to this? I mean, we just don't want people to be anxious and worried. What can they specifically do to deal with this and responsibly and with regard to their own finances?
There's actually 4 takeaways from this for your listeners.
Okay.
Number 1, I would have them consider placing a fraud alert on all their files, especially if they check with the Equifax website and see if they have been compromised.
How do they do a fraud alert? What do you mean by put a fraud alert on all their files? What files?
All their credit card information and bank accounts.
Okay.
Because these guys, you gotta remember, Brad, they not only stole their credit card and their bank account numbers, they have date of births and Social Security numbers. I mean, this is not going to go away. I mean, the crooks and the criminals are going to have a heyday with this for years to come.
Yeah, it's and when I think about 145 million people throughout the United States, it's almost half of our population. That's very concerning, obviously.
Yeah, it's tragic to say the least.
Okay.
Obviously, the second thing your listeners could do is, of course, monitor their existing credit card and bank accounts very closely. Just like my office manager, I mean, they drained her account and she found out about it pretty quickly, but you need to keep on tabs on that.
All right.
A third thing your listeners could do is to file their taxes early, because what's happening right now is that they've got their Social Security numbers and the criminals are filing fraudulent tax returns with fraudulent information, and they're getting these bogus refunds sent to their address and bank accounts. So they're getting ahead of the taxpayer and filing taxes. So if your listeners can file your taxes early, they could beat the criminals at filing these fraudulent tax returns that's taking place.
Okay, good. That makes a lot of sense. What about passwords?
Yeah, the last thing your listeners should do is reset all their passwords immediately for any email addresses and social media accounts and anything that they use with passwords. It should all be reset.
Well, I heard people should do that every year anyway.
Yeah, that's just a common sense thing to do for sure. But now, in light of this breach, they definitely need to reset those passwords.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I understand the IRS will never contact you with unsolicited by telephone, email, or social media. So if those happen and they say they're from the IRS, someone calls from the IRS, people should be very much alarmed about those kind of scams, I'm sure.
Yeah, the biggest scam right now, Brad, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have been part of that, is a telephone scam where they're impersonating IRS revenue agents and saying they owe money and that they need to pay immediately, otherwise they're going to be arrested. And I've had so many of my clients call me and say, "Is this legitimate?" Because it's really fearful and intimidating to get a call saying that they're IRS.
Yeah, and it is intimidating, and they'll probably act very intimidating too. So, bottom line, they get a call from the IRS. That's very likely a scam. Now, there are several types of scams that you've discussed before. I want you to go over those, like phone calls. You already talked about that. IRS saying, "Oh, we give final notice." But what about phishing emails sent to individuals?
Yeah, this is another thing, Brad. It's an email that the criminals actually stole the official logo of the IRS, so it looks pretty official on the email itself.
Okay.
But what they're saying is that the IRS has a refund waiting for you. Please fill out the following information.
That's very tempting. I can see a lot of people saying, "Woohoo!"
Yeah, woohoo! I hit the lottery. I'm getting a $10,000 refund, or I've seen some up to $20,000. And unbeknownst to the one receiving it, I mean, it's a scam, and the IRS never sends out emails. Period.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's your clue right there to your listeners.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. But phishing emails, those are definitely something to be concerned about. I know. Also, once received an email. It popped up on the screen, and it said your computer has a virus. Click here to get the virus taken away, and that's part of the scam. You call that number, and then you give them their information, and they get rid of the virus. But in reality, they've gotten your information that they can use and to violate your privacy and your financial accounts. What about scam letters?
Yeah, I mean, they're still using the old snail mail approach, too. These are, of course, fake letters, but they're using the IRS logo again on the letters that are coming in the mail. You don't see them as much, but they're still using this as another scam, and they're asking individuals to send in money that they owe to the IRS, and, of course, it's all fake. But the key here to your listeners, Brad, is that there's always a special code in the upper right-hand corner of an official IRS notice, so they could always call the IRS directly at 800-829-1040 to make sure that's a valid letter for your listeners from the IRS.
Okay, so you should never contact anyone unsolicited by telephone, right? Or the IRS the IRS will never contact you unsolicited by telephone.
No, they won't unless you get at least one or two letters previously, and then if you're in collections, they could call you, but it's pretty rare. But you should have plenty of notice that they're going to be calling you ahead of time.
Okay. Well, Phil, this has been very helpful, and I think you've given a lot of really good information. You deal with the IRS. You're part of the IRS. I guess you're the IRS problem solver is your nickname. And if people are still sort of bewildered, unsure what to do, is there a place they can go to get this kind of information?
Yeah, they could go to my website at liberatorecpa.com or stopirspain.com, or call us at 877-6-SOLVER, Brad. We'd be happy to talk to them.
Okay, that's the easiest. 877, the number 6,
Solver.
and then solver. And then you guys can help them work through these different issues, or if they're not sure about something. I just really appreciate you and your heart, Phil, for taking the time to help us and our listeners. I was so disturbed when I saw how huge and how deep the breach was and the impact it could have on so many people that I just really felt compelled to have you on the program, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. to help so many. Keep up the great work, Phil, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Brad, so much.
Okay. Take care.